I'm adulting, but I don't feel like an adult. Within the last few years, the culture came up with a new word, adulting. Related books and articles have proliferated. In this episode, two psychologists ponder what is adulting, why has it only now entered our consciousness, and how can we deal with the nagging doubt that we're not truly full-fledged adults? That's what we'll be discussing in this episode of Life's Dirty Little Secrets.
We're all very human and fallible, and yet we live in a society that rewards pretending we're not fallible, or the range of acceptable fallibility is narrow.
We are constantly comparing our insides to other people's outsides and feeling inadequate and guilty, even ashamed.
Trying to blend in means parts of ourselves must disappear, and we must then live in fear that we will be found out.
Here, together, we will create a space where we can laugh, cry, and carry our suffering and hurts lightly.
In the service of being deeply human.
This is Life's Dirty Little Secrets. All right. Well, Here we are. I'm Chris McCury in Seattle, Washington, and in the States.
And I'm Emma Waddington from the other side of the world in Singapore.
And today we're going to be talking about a topic that has been on my mind for quite some time, and that is the, I think, not unusual idea that we sometimes just don't feel like full-fledged adults.
That's right. Yes. So true. And it's an interesting topic because it isn't something that the media has been talking about for a very long time, but in the last what has it been? 5, 6 years? This idea of adulting has been discussed, this idea that we need to learn to be responsible adults and that's part of our journey as we grow.
That adulting is something extraordinary or out of the ordinary that we should be surprised when we do it.
Yes. Or we should feel it.
Right.
Almost like you feel like you've suddenly become an adult and that includes doing this adult stuff. And I guess when we started thinking about this topic, started to realize that there are still many, many, many times that I don't think I'm quite there yet. Like I haven't quite reached that milestone. Like when will it happen where I feel this sort of sense of maturity and confidence that I know what I'm doing?
Well, I think part of the problem is that we get to feel that, but then it goes away. It's sort of this fleeting thing. And our hope is that it will show up and be permanent. And I'll never have to like doubt myself again as an adult, but it's like, sometimes it's like, yay, I just, I'm an adult. I just did something really cool and adult-like, which is weird that we even have to, think. But then we're like thrown back into this, doubt and, sense of perpetual adolescence or something. But it's actually been, it's been about, 6 or 7 years. There was a Time magazine article in 2016 that talked about adulting, and it's just strange that it's become a thing. I don't think people had to think about it, or maybe they did and they just didn't talk about it. Maybe it was in fact a dirty little secret.
Yeah, totally. And I wonder if once upon a time it was based in, when we think about it, when I think of my parents, it depended on what you did more than how you felt. Like you just did adult things as opposed to feeling like an adult. Maybe they did feel more adult-like, and now, I don't know. I just wonder whether why are we now thinking about it so much more?
I don't know. That's, been troubling me as well. And it's not something that anybody really talked about.
No.
But now it's sort of out in the open, and there are all these books out there about how to be an adult and all these articles. Right. And, I could have used something like that coming up.
Totally. Yes. In fact, I have this book that I bought the kids that's called How to Be a Person.
No.
And it talks about all these actions how to learn from everything from how to make scrambled eggs to how to write to your member of parliament a letter. So it's all these behaviors, all these things that you can learn how to do to sort of move you through into this adult. It's almost like a guidebook. It's fascinating.
Right.
How to make your bed, how to, wash your clothes, how to save money. And it's like a recipe book on what's expected of you when you become a person. They don't use the word adult, but that's how it looks.
Right. And there are so many books out there like that. And I never encountered one, in my 20s or 30s. I'm surprised my parents didn't buy one for me.
Yeah, it's curious, isn't it? There was kind of an expectation that you would know. And now we know that so many, I can't remember what percentage, but a significant group of first-year students at university drop out because they're really struggling with this adulting, with this ability to take the responsibility as an individual without the support of the parent. And so that some of the books that I think you're referring to talks about how to prepare them or how to prepare ourselves to make that leap into adulthood. And I just wonder, yeah.
Well, and university is sort of an in-between stage.
Yes, totally.
Which is, useful for a lot of people to be able to have some semblance of adulthood, but you can, often come home on the weekend with a bag of laundry.
Totally. Yeah, like I did. In fact, I used to travel abroad with a bag of laundry. I used to just turn up, and my mother still talks about it, about us showing up with dirty clothes and get fed. It's really true. And just going back to that feeling of adult, and it is so true that it feels like it's kind of really when I think of being an adult, I think of no longer having self-doubt, having confidence, like knowing that you're doing something right. There is a feeling that I attribute to being an adult, like knowing what to do.
Right. And I think that's part of the issue is that, growing up, I think a lot of people, I know I did, we would look at the adults and, it's part of that judging our insides by other people's outsides. And I would look at the adults and they would be kind of moving through life, getting stuff done. And we weren't privy to, their turmoils, some occasionally. In some families, unfortunately, the kids are completely steeped in the adults' drama, which is not very good. But it was this idea that at some point I would pass through this golden doorway and I would have, no more inner conflicts, no more doubts, no more uncertainties. I would just know what to do. And I'm still waiting for that to happen. And I'm going to be 70 in a couple of weeks. So I'm giving up hope.
Yes.
But yeah, it's a struggle.
It is a struggle. I was thinking the other day of exactly that, with being an adult, having children and all that responsibility, how there's those moments of, anxiety, worry, fear that maybe it might not work out and you might not be able to support the family the way you want to. And all this sort of worries, especially, nowadays when, the economy feels a little bit more fragile. It's an honest, it's a real worry. And it suddenly hit me that we are a dual income household. So there's two of us holding the weight. But growing up, it was only my dad. And I thought, I'm in my mid-40s, and it was the first time I thought, wow, he was carrying all of that on his own.
Mm-hmm.
And I never heard it. I never heard this. Well, now and again, he would be worried about work, but nothing very big. But I imagine he was carrying all of that on his own. And I thought he had it sorted out. I thought he knew what he was doing. And now I think about, and I'm sure he did have a lot of anxiety, but we never saw it. We never heard about it.
Mm-hmm.
Now I carry it, and suddenly it's hit me that he probably felt the same.
Oh yeah, I'm sure at times he did. But I think there was just this different ethos around that where you sort of sucked it up and you didn't complain. And again, we probably shouldn't be burdening our children with those kinds of things.
No. You're right.
So, yes, is this a generational thing? Is this, what's the deal? But, I think there's obviously more to explore here. And people to talk to and interview. So this is all just very preliminary and getting the topic out there.
Yeah.
Because I think, compared to other generations, and we're talking, well, you were mentioning that your father, he went where when he was 6?
So my dad went to boarding school at the age of 6. So he was separated from his mother and his father, and they used to live in these huge dorms with lots of boys.
Yeah.
I think he was launched into this world of being independent at an incredibly young age. And it still happens in the UK that people are sent to boarding school so young.
Well, when my father was 13 and he was born in 26, so, this would have been 39, he was sent to military school in Pennsylvania. Carson Lawn, How to Learn, How to Labor, How to Live. And it's still there. They started Carson Lawn in like the 1850s or something. When my son Ian, who you know well, would be giving us trouble as a teenager, I would open the home computer to boarding school, web pages and just sort of leave it open just to, bother him. But, at 13, he was there. He was in military school and when there he got uniforms and they're marching, and that's where he learned how to smoke cigarettes and drink and, all that stuff. And then immediately went into the Army at 17.
Wow.
And so he got thrown into, adulthood. And I think we lack some of those rituals, some of those transitional experiences. We don't get
really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. We don't get taken out into the jungle and kept up for 3 days and circumcised with a dull piece of flint.
Yeah.
And then you come back to the village and now you sleep in the men's hut. And it's sort of like, we're done here. You're a man. And, maybe those individuals had some doubts as well. But yeah, it seems like people are prolonging their adolescence or their early adulthood a lot longer than they used to.
For sure. And it's just making me think about, in a way, our expectations around how you should be able to feel once you become an adult has changed. I mean, there was no expectation that being an adult would suddenly feel different. It would just be about what you're doing.
Yeah. In fact, I think that was actually part of adulthood, is like you stopped thinking about how you're feeling.
That's right. Exactly. That's so true. So true. Because you had to just get on with things. Whilst now that there's an expectation in a way that you feel a certain way when you become an adult.
Mm-hmm.
Or you're supposed to. And that, we protect, in a way, it's like it's a transition that is quite extended. And people are living at home for so much longer. What's the average age now that people move out? It's getting older and older.
Right. Yeah. Or they come back. As our son did.
Yeah. So, and it is harder.
It is harder. The economy, the way it is, people can't afford rents. And, there's a lot to be said for multi-generational living. It can be quite beneficial for everybody. But there's that nagging sense of, well, until I achieve X, Y, and Z, I'm not a full-fledged adult.
That's right. And I was listening to this podcast by this dean who was saying that this is the most intelligent generation, but the least resilient.
Okay. That's not good.
Yeah. No, and she was saying that they're incredibly smart, but they struggle with coping, with being able to withstand sort of challenges. And I wonder if that's partly because our expectations have changed as well, as how you should, in a way, feel about things, how we make decisions. It's much more emotionally based than perhaps it used to be before. Like knowing what you really want to do, or, what will give you a feeling of purpose. Perhaps before you just got on with it and then you found out. Like We're asking bigger questions now.
Right. Or you accommodate yourself to your lot. You were apprenticed off at 7, and you're going to be a a cobbler because your father was a cobbler.
That's right. Yeah.
Or back in the day where, the oldest son went into the family business, the middle son went into the military, and the youngest son went into the priesthood.
Yeah, that was it. And I wonder if that was, it's interesting because in a way it's simpler, but I imagine less meaningful, or we got meaning out of other things.
Or sometimes it just wasn't a good fit. Temperamentally, the priest and the military person should have switched roles.
Yes, exactly. And yet you had no power or choice.
No,
you're just sort of launched into this.
Right. And so maybe there are too many choices, too many options.
That's right. And there's so much more of an emphasis about how you feel about things than before. Like feeling that something is like this. Listening to this Dean, she was saying that they are so much smarter because we're studying so much more and people are striving so much higher, but there's so much more anxiety and fear of making mistakes and getting it wrong. That didn't used to be the case. And so being able to survive in the workforce is much harder than it used to be.
Right.
Because we ask ourselves so many more questions. So within that, there's this sense, I guess, is this, am I an adult? Waiting for it to feel a certain way.
And as I mentioned before, there are moments when I do feel that way. Maybe, I get that little squirt of dopamine in my, brain, but it's gone. And then it's plunging back into the depth and the groping in the dark.
So true. And you just need somebody to question you or challenge you, or at least I do, to ask me, are you sure? Even in sort of, in my relationship, I sometimes wonder, we'll talk about things and do things together, but sometimes I'll make a decision on my own. And if Francois turns around and goes, well, I don't agree with it, suddenly I'm like, oh no, maybe it was the wrong decision. And I notice that I rely on, probably not, it was fine. We all live, we're still here, but it's that sense of approval, right? Making sure that you're getting it right, and you need that feed, just like we did as kids.
Sure. That doesn't go away.
Different. No, it doesn't go away, even though we're supposed, we're this adults and super responsible, and to think that, we carry on that self-doubt and that insecurity throughout life, even when we're doing things that bringing up, like sometimes I stop and I think, oh my goodness, I'm responsible for these 3 little kids. Like they rely on me and my decision-making ability.
It's terrifying.
It's terrifying. I mean, if I stop and think about it, like, this is madness. Gave me this job. And then you just do.
Right.
There's there's two parts. You can sort of think about it and get really worried about things, and then we can just keep moving.
My mother had 4 children by the time she was 26.
Wow.
I was number 4. And one of my older sisters was asking her, how did you even survive? And she said, youth and ignorance.
So
but,
true.
she just had to do it. And so she did
That's right. That's right. It's quite incredible. I think, funnily enough, I was just thinking about my mother the other day. So my mother grew up in a small town in Spain, and she'd never left Spain until she met my father, who was her English teacher.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And he came to Spain to teach English whilst Spain was still under a dictatorship. So my mom hung out with him, and her family disapproved of him. And eventually she left Spain and married him, and her family never came to the wedding.
Wow.
And then eventually he got a job as a journalist, and he was like, it's time for me to become an adult and get a proper job as opposed to this English as a second language teaching job. And they then got posted in Brazil in 1981. So here is my mother, who'd never left Spain, even, small. I think she'd gone once to Italy or something. Is suddenly in Sao Paulo in Brazil in 1981. with no phones to call home, no FaceTime, no internet to search questions, didn't speak the language, had 2 young daughters. And I just think, how did she do it? And again, she just did. She spent her life at the pediatrician, I think, because we were constantly sick with all these funky tropical diseases. But yeah, it must have been so scary for her.
Mm-hmm. I think part of being an adult is having this cloud of doubt.
Yeah.
It's going to be there. And one of the things that my father used to talk about is he talked about the difference between problems and conditions.
Yes.
And you've heard me talk about this. That a problem is a situation you don't like, and you look around for some solutions, you apply a solution, maybe more than one, and you solve the problem. But a condition is a situation you don't like, but for which there are no solutions.
Yeah.
So problems, call for coping and planning and strategizing and things. And I like to say that the weather is not a problem, because you can't solve it, but you cope with it. You plan for it.
That's right.
And I think the doubt of whether or not I'm a full-fledged adult, I think, is a condition.
So true.
And so we bear it, and we don't let it interfere. And perhaps this is a good point to mention that Emma and I are practitioners of something called acceptance and commitment therapy, or ACT. And it concerns itself with a lot of these stories that we tell ourselves and about the world, and how at heart, one has to hold these stories lightly.
Yeah, that's right.
Because if we get fused with them, hooked by them, tangled up in these stories, they can sometimes lead us into unhappy places and unhappy behavior patterns.
Yeah, and keep us very stuck.
Very stuck.
If we start thinking about whether I am an adult, do I feel like an adult? Should I be feeling this way if I'm an adult?
Why don't I feel like an adult?
I feel like an adult. All these assumptions about how adults should be feeling.
I mean, I can answer that question. I can answer the question about why I don't feel like an adult. I have a long list, but I don't want to go there.
Yeah, so true. And it does get in the way.
It does.
So often does.
Yeah. Because sometimes if you stop and think about it, you're not going to get the dirty diaper changed.
No, or pay the bill or make a decision that is important for the family.
Right.
We can be really tangled up in those anxious thoughts and the what ifs. And sometimes it's only experience that tells us that you've done the right thing.
Right. And it's otherwise it's paralysis. The other thing that I was thinking about as we were preparing for this, to the extent that people can tell we were prepared, is I think there's also a certain ambivalence about being an adult.
Yes.
I would dearly love many times for somebody to come in and just, deal with it so that I don't have to.
That's so true. Yeah.
There was this young man I was working with. He was a 10-year-old boy in my clinical psychology practice. And he wasn't doing any of his homework. He just wasn't doing his schoolwork at all. And so I said, what's the big deal about just getting your homework done? And he thought for a moment and he said, it's more mature than I want to be. And I laughed and I said, yeah, I have those days.
I feel it. Yes, exactly. I do too. What a nice way to put it.
Yeah. He was, bright kid, sensitive. And I said, so if you just do a good job, they'll expect that from you all the time, right? And he said, oh, yeah. It's like there's a psychologist in the States who has done a lot of work with ADHD, Russell Barkley. And he says, our kids have a good day and we hold it against them for the rest of their lives.
Oh, bless. So true, isn't it?
Yeah. So I think there's that component to it where it's like, I don't want to do this. I want somebody else to take care of it for me.
Totally. And I mean, sometimes, it's really hard work to continue and to keep going.
Yeah.
And I have my moments where I have, mini tantrums, maybe not so many, big tantrums where I'm like, I just can't do it anymore. I need a break. In fact, the other day, the kids were, it's bedtime. And they were getting ready for bed. They were cranky. And I was like, you know what? I'm cranky too. You guys are just going to sort yourselves out. I'm going to go and watch a program. I can't do it tonight. I just can't do it. And they looked at me and they were like, what? This is not how it goes. And I said to them, this is how it goes tonight. Tonight, Mom is checking out. And Mom is just going to lay on the couch and watch some TV. And you are going to put yourselves to bed. And they were shocked. And it took them forever. In fact, it got worse and worse and worse. Eventually, they went to bed really late. But I was adamant. I was just not. That day, I was not doing the bedtime. Because actually, maybe it was an adulting moment. I realized that I was just I didn't have any resources left. I needed to take a break. And
That's
sometimes being an adult requires taking responsibility for those pieces. And it's really hard.
Right. And to know when you're not up for it.
You're not up for it. And the retaliation is huge. I mean, I had 3 children on my back, going, what are you doing, Mom? What's going on? No, you're going to read me a story. I'm like, I don't know. You're going to sing me a song. No, I'm not. I'm just going to sit here. And you guys are going to sort yourselves out. And you're going to be okay. I trust that you can do this. Yeah. It did take them over an hour to be okay. But I got to watch my program.
Right. And, that's a far cry from boarding school.
That's right. Yeah. And my husband walked through the door and he was like, what's going on here? I said, well, I'm taking a break tonight. I decided I don't have the energy and I'm going to look after myself. But yes, he was kind of shocked when he showed up and they were still awake and really late on a school night. I thought, well, I've just not got it in me tonight.
Right.
But yeah, and that's taking responsibility. That's being an adult. And actually having looked after them when I couldn't do it probably would have been a mistake.
Yeah, it could have led to nothing good.
Having a tantrum.
Yeah, maybe several of them,
Several of them, all of us together in harmony. But yeah, it's hard. It's hard and risky because you can get things wrong.
Yes, you can, yeah. But the fear of being wrong can really keep us paralyzed.
Absolutely. And then we tell ourselves off for being paralyzed, and that just adds, and it's a snowball effect, isn't it?
Right.
It just gets worse and worse, and we can get more and more stuff.
So I'm not sure what you did when you interrupted your slide into chaos that night, but, to be able to notice, we're thinking X and feeling Y, that historically that has not led to a great place, and then pivot right. to something a little more adaptive. And that's tricky.
It is.
But, taking a deep mindful breath and, some little self-compassion and pivot.
Yeah, absolutely. And giving yourself permission.
Mm-hmm.
For me, I often think about it, and I think about it with my clients too. Let's give ourselves permission just to be in this moment, whatever is happening for us, that's okay.
Yeah.
And that takes a lot of the energy out of it, actually. That's when we struggle with it, that it's so hard.
Right. It's exhausting. And then we don't have the energy to do what we need to do.
That's right. That self-compassion piece is so important. Okay with not being okay.
Yeah. That sounds like a topic for another episode.
That's right. Yeah. And how hard it is for us to not be okay. And it kind of feeds back into this adult, that we have to have it all figured out and we have to be okay and all sorted out in order to be in this world, when actually we're all hiding this. We're all in the same soup.
We're all a mess.
Yeah, absolutely. We're all a mess. Sometimes I say to my clients, I wish you saw what I saw, because I see every day people struggling. People of all sort of sizes, ages, races, jobs, stages in life, all struggling with very similar things. which is kind of the essence of being human.
And not speaking of them to others and keeping them secret.
That's why I sometimes think that our job is such a privilege. Because we get to see that actually we're not alone. Even us sitting in our special chair, we know that we're not alone. And we know that we recognize and can empathize with all of those feelings too. Nothing is foreign.
Right. Nothing's not human.
Nothing's not human. That's right.
Thanks so much for tuning into the Life's Dirty Little Secrets podcast.
If you have any feedback for us or secrets for future episodes, you can email us at lifesdirtylittlesecretspodcast@gmail.com.
Be sure to follow us on Instagram at Life's Dirty Little Secrets or on Facebook at Life's Dirty Little Secrets Podcast.
We invite you to follow, rate, and review us on wherever you listen to this podcast. It is the best way to get our podcast out in front of new listeners.
We'll be back in a couple of weeks with more.
See you then.